Hello and welcome to Sustain, the podcast where we talk about sustaining open source for the long haul. Who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Is this thing recording? A question I asked myself 2 minutes in, but we caught it. It's okay. Very excited to be here today with my guest who has a lot more experience than I do at organizing things. Clearly, since he hasn't messed up as much as I have just now. I'm, of course, Richard Littauer, your host, and I'm joined today by Mannie Young, calling in from Lagos, although his normal home is in Accra, Ghana. Mannie, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm good, Richard. Nice to be here this evening. Great to see you. Please, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thanks so much for coming on. It's really great to have you. So you're an open source developer yourself, correct?
Yeah, I think actively contributing to the Python software community. So yeah, and also encoding so as well.
Awesome. But you're not just a developer because you're also the ED of PyCon Ghana and one of the organizers of PyCon Africa, correct?
Yeah, correct. Actually, the executive director of the Python software community in Ghana, which comprises of different initiatives and also user groups that we have in the country, and also have been part of the PyCon Africa team since the very first edition, so 2019. Where we had the first PyCon Africa conference on the continent.
That's awesome. Where was that?
I think that was actually held in Accra, Ghana. So our community, we were opportunity to host the first PyCon, and I think it was really great. Had a lot of software developers and also those who are actually into the Python programming language on the continent, all coming towards Accra, Ghana for the very first time meeting as a community. So it was great and really a memorable event. And we're looking forward to the next one we will be having.
So I've talked to a lot of Nigerians on this podcast because they're very vocal and very awesome. And OSCA is normally in Lagos, right? So it makes sense. In fact, you're in Lagos right now. So Mannie, you were at the OSCA Fest 2023 last year, and there was, of course, a sustained session there for an entire day, which is awesome. Can you tell me what that was like for you? Were there certain tracks that you went to? Were you moderating?
Yeah, I think I was opportunity to be at the sustain events they had before the main conference. And I met a lot of other developers who actually all contribute to open source. I think the tracks that they had, for those that I can recall, I think we had those that were focused on open source in data science. They had those that were marketing and funding. I knew there was design. I also knew there was documentation. I started off by the group that actually Ikega started with. Although I knew as time went on, some of the moderators started switching. I think we're all timed. And after PyLadies would announce to everyone that it's time, then we had to switch. But I really learned a lot during those sessions. I was much more interested in documentation because that's something we actually have been working to get even Python Ghana and also even the Python community as a whole in Africa. I was also interested in design because I also happen to also be a designer too. So I think it was really fun. I think hearing different people speak, I think people who stood out for me was when Ada came to talk about her track. And I think also Ruth started with us. And also I think I also got to hear about the open source programs. And I think the specialized project, which I think that was Omotola, if I'm not mistaken, because she spoke about outreach. I really had a great experience with them. And I'm looking forward to the next one they would have. Hopefully I'll be also if it's in Lagos, I'll be in Lagos once again to attend OSCA Fest 2024.
I'm glad you had a great time. That sounds awesome. Since you said you were in the documentation session, and I know you have your notes with you because like any good open source person, you document everything that you do. Can you tell me what your major takeaways were? Was there anything that really stood out to you from that session?
For once, we all agreed when we were having a discussion was that documentation is something that is really needed in open source because people who are coming new into maybe a particular project would need to have an idea of what it's all about. And also I try to encourage people to see how they could even contribute to open source documentation that are already out there or even existing. We were even told about specific projects like hackathons like that of Hacktoberfest, where people all come together to contribute to things, which also can also be an opportunity that people who would want to contribute to documentations of different projects out there, from VLC to Mozilla to Gitbooks and different projects that all have different documentations. Even I know within the Python community itself, they're even revamping and even working on some of the documentations they have in different areas too as well. So yeah, I think we were encouraged to document. And also I was also looking at how we could also even incorporate that into what we do locally as a community, which is having documentations of some of the things we do. And I think we're also working on that in Python. And I think we actually got the Git book, which we are encouraging most of those who are contributing to the community to try and document what they do. Because I think previously most of us were using docs, but I think we tried to see how we could have more people use the Git book to do most of their drafts, their organization and everything, because we made them understand that they can actually link that to their GitHub repo. And that also contributes as them committing to a particular project. So that's what we are working on locally, making sure everyone is making use of Git books, creating their collections and their spaces, all the plans for their local groups and everything, do it over there in Git book. It reflects on their GitHub. Then they also feel that, yes, they're actually the non-coding aspects of the community that they are actually, or contributions they are doing to the community is also committed on their GitHub repository as well. So really excited about some of the things I learned.
Can you tell me, how big is the Ghanese Python community? How many people are we talking about when you say you're part of the community of the PSF there?
Actually, I think we've grown quite substantially since we started. Actually, it's in the community actively, we kicked off way back 2017, 2016. And since then, we've had different initiatives, like I said. So we're under the Python software community in Ghana. We have PyLadies Ghana. We also have PyData Ghana, and then we have pipeline projects we are now working on, which is like PyClubs, which is an initiative we are even just currently bringing out to the community as well. So I think we have, different initiatives and things we are doing, and also then have the user groups as well. So just in Ghana, we have the user groups in Accra, Kumasi, and also different places too as well. So yeah, I think the community is quite huge.
That's awesome. That is super cool. OSCA, which is one of the reasons I got you on this podcast, because we're sort of doing a retrospective on how OSCA went this year, was around 1,000 people in Lagos in June, which is amazing, of which around 190 or so went to the Sustain event. I got those numbers from Bolaji. You can blame him from the previous podcast. No, don't blame anyone. How many people came from Ghana with you? And were you organizing OSCA this year?
No, I wasn't part of the organizing team for OSCA, but I think I know most of those who actually are actively part of the team from Roots, and the rest. So I think from our community, or from those in Ghana, I think we had people from our community who spoke at the conference. I know of Abigail who spoke. Cool. I think I was at her talk. And I think the other Ghanaians, but I think it's Abigail because she was speaking. So I think I was the presentation she gave.
Is that Abigail Dogbe? I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
No, not Abigail Dogbe. Abigail Dobe actually is part of our community, but she's currently in the US. So, yeah.
It must have been a huge relief to go to a conference and not have to organize anything.
Yeah, I think it was a huge relief because I think to be one of the first conference, I think I actually actively attended as an attendee and, just being behind the scenes, watching and being part of the conference and not hopping one place, trying to make sure everything were in place, everything is moving smoothly. So it was such a huge relief.
What were some highlights for you? What did you love about it?
Okay, so first of all, I think that some of the talks I attended were really great. And also the diversity when it came to the speakers they had. The talks I attended were really great. And also I would say that welcoming environment that they had. Because when you land, you know that yes, you've arrived. The whole event. I think I was opportunity to know some of the things that were happening behind the scenes. So I could say they really pulled off a great job during the conference. And I would really give that to the team over there.
Now, you attended the Sustain workshops, is right? Where there was no talks. It's just sitting around and talking about some of the topics. Do you remember what topics you talked about?
Yeah, we spoke about things that had to do with design. I remember design. I remember those talking about community. I also got to meet David. Yeah, I think it's David also who actually have been communicating to him via mails. And I think we met during the Sustain Africa. So as of now, I'm my best to recall most of the things we did. It's actually been quite a long time. But yeah, one person's session I really learned a lot from was that of Roots Higa, where she spoke about something that actually had to do with community. So I learned from that. I think Omotala also came and spoke. And those are the two sessions I know actively attended.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. So I'm really curious. I don't know a lot about the open source community in Ghana as opposed to the open source community in Nigeria. I know that Nigeria has OSCA and that there's a lot of really colorful characters who talk a lot about open source and are really invested in it and are all over social media, and it's awesome to see. But I just don't know a lot about the Ghanese community. And so I'm curious if you could tell me about the differences between the two open source cultures.
So I think, okay, I'll put it this way. If you look at the social media platforms, so let's, for example, take Twitter, you'd say when it comes to those who actually advocate about things they do, also the Nigerians, they're actually out there putting themselves out there, showing what they're doing. And I would say over there in Ghana, we have a lot of people who are really doing a lot, but they don't talk too much about what they do. They are more of reserved. They keep it, a little bit on the low key. So they're actually doing a lot of things over there in the Ghanaian tech communities. Just that I would say it's recently that you'd say that they're actually pushing themselves out there online. There are those people who are actually online who are actually really doing things or showcasing things they do. But I would say it's now we are so even trying, even as a community locally in, like say, the Python software community in Ghana, we're trying to, advocate that they should put themselves out there. They should show people and document what they do. So now I've been trying to enforce like they're making sure that the leads blog about things they do. Because if you don't blog about things, you don't know what they will know what you're doing. And since they say you're contributing to open source, you won't have any record to show anyone that you are contributing to a project if you don't talk about what you do. So I would just say it has to do more of like culture. The Ghanaians are a little bit laid back, relaxed, and the Nigerians are really out there, So I would say they are doing a lot locally in Ghana. And I think very soon, they'll all be all over the place on social media and everywhere.
Do you think that leads to differences in funding or opportunities for people in the Ghanaian open source community? When we talk about sustainability of open source communities, right, not just individual projects, being reserved and not talking about it leads to maybe a lack of adoption. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think that also counts because when it comes to open source projects, every open source project actually needs basically what you just spoke about, which is resources, funding, and things like that. I would say if they get such opportunity, yes, they'll be able to do much more better. But I think that is not something that I would just point to Ghana. I think basically even Africa as a whole, other countries too as well also need such opportunities, resources, and funding too as well. If I should put it if that is the reason why the Ghanaian group are a little bit laid back, I'm not sure I'll put it that way. I think it just has to do with them naturally, just how they are.
I know recently there was an open letter that was signed to the PSF on behalf of PyCon Africa about discrepancies in approaches and how funding was organized for PyCon and how soon it got to the actual communities themselves, even though the board said it should get there faster. Do you want to talk about that at all? You don't have to if you don't want to, but I'm curious about your perspective. This is the first time we've mentioned it on this podcast.
That actually had to do with DjangoCon and not even PyCon. The relationship between the PSF and the Pan-African community, I think it's actually great. Just that I think the recent events that unfolded, I think during the past DjangoCon was actually something we had to look at and also come together to speak as one voice. Over here in Africa, there are a lot of things that are different from how things are actually done over there in the West. So I would say I don't want to say anything that may go off the records or go against most of what they have spoken about. Cultural wise, because what happened with that was, I think, issues where people on the board actually had issues with the host nation, which was Tanzania, and based on some of the guidelines or the code of conduct of things that were done, and they wanted to see maybe if it would be okay if they could support the conference. And we are like, this is open source, and most of the people who are contributing, they don't have to put their necks out there for something that it's just open source contribution. I'm trying my best not to say anything that got off, but I think it actually basically had to do with the laws of the land. So, for example, in Africa, LGBTQ is not accepted in some African countries, and if you want to now put that as a criteria on how or if an open source project will be supported or not, then I think you are then removing Africa totally from anything that has to do with open source. But that's why the letter was phrased the way it was, because we are also a minority group, and it's like you're pairing two groups against each other. So I would say the PSF relationship with, because over in our community in Ghana, we have good relations with the PSF. And this was also something that also came up even during the PyCon Africa 2019, which was resolved. So we are in talks with the PSF, and I actually believe very soon there would be concluded outcome of the meetings and things we're having will be made public.
Thank you for being so eloquent about that. And yeah, it is hard when you have a country that has policies that don't allow certain subsets of the population the same freedoms and rights as other subsets. For example, here in America, Texas has issues and Florida have issues with LGBTQ people. So should we not have conferences anymore in those states? An open question that we're all wrestling with right now in the community at large. Definitely part of the question of what does it mean to have a sustainable, healthy community when the communities of the state are not healthy. I don't have an answer for that. Thank you for talking to it briefly. Thank you so much for coming on and talking a bit about Sustain and about OSCA and about the community in Ghana. I have some final questions now that we're running out of time. So first off, where can people get involved with PyCon Africa and PyCon Ghana and your various communities?
Yeah, great. So with regards to PyCon Africa, I think we've been working on that of PyCon Africa 2024, which will be next year. So for now, if you want to reach out to the team, I think you can just shoot us a mail at team@pycon.africa. And I think we would be putting out notice and also publications on our various social media platforms. With regards to PyCon or Python Ghana, I think our website, pythonghana.org, is there. And also you can reach out to us via mail, which is hello@pythonghana.org. Then I think I spoke about our initiatives and also various user groups. So with Python Ghana, we are just we've been working on the pilot phase of PyClubs, which is just basically an initiative we are trying to have where we would have various Python clubs in various tertiary institutions around various institutions, maybe starting from Ghana. But I think with something we're also looking out to open to the Python community as we move along. Yeah, those are various places you can reach us with regards to PyCon Africa and Python Ghana.
Is that PyClubs, PyClubs.com?
.org, PyClubs.org, yeah.
Excellent. That'll be in the show notes for anyone who wants to listen there and go check it out. Super, super cool. Where can people learn about you and your work? You have a blog, right? You just said if you don't blog about things, no one knows what you're doing.
I knew when I was talking, I think this is actually the first interview I'm having. And I think with all the years of having conferences, I just gave my first official tech talk this year too as well.
Woo,
so,
well done.
Yeah, I would say I'm very guilty, or I would say I've been someone who actually been always behind the scenes and just making sure everything is working out. But yeah, I'm gradually now trying to come out of my shell and looking forward to how things will be. So for now, for me, a lot of people call me anonymous. I think the only place you can just find me is maybe on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I'm on social media platforms, but I'm not active. But I'm working on my website, so very soon I think that will be out. So that would be where I would have my portfolio and everything I've been involved in.
Will you have it up by the end of January? Will you give me a link for it? Excellent. Yeah, I'm going to hold you to that.
It's up, but I'm not sure I've put anything yet, but that's just mannieyoung.com. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. I'm sending you an email to remind you, give me a website, end of January.
Yeah, because they actually yet to announce me officially as the PyCon chair. Cool. So I've been trying to work on the site to make sure it's off script though. I've been trying to work on the site to make sure I have something about me. So when they announce, people are trying to say, who is this guy? They can see things I've been involved with.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Mannie Young, Mannie Young, spelled the normal way on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been excellent to learn about your experiences and what you've been doing, the differences between Ghana and Nigerian OSS briefly, and everything you're doing sounds awesome. Even if you're doing it anonymously behind the scenes, it sounds like you're doing real work. So thank you, Mannie. Keep it up and take care.
Thank you.